Before we dive in, drop a quick hi in the comments. It may seem small, but trust me, it really helps YouTube share this story with more sci-fi fans like us. I'd love to see who's watching.
The shuttle looked like a wound. They had come to witness the joke. Delegates gathered at the observation galleries above the bay, 300 representatives from 47 species. Docking Bay 17 had received vessels from 900 worlds, crystal yachts from the Veyari pleasure moons, living ships grown in Thalosi nurseries, Kethvoran war barges that hummed with hive song. Nothing like this. The human craft sat on the pristine landing pad like a tumor. Scorch marks ran along its hull in overlapping patterns, atmospheric entries without proper shielding. Weld lines crossed the fuselage where plates had been bolted over breaches. One thruster was a different color than the others, clearly salvaged from a wreck. "It actually came," a Drenith aristocrat trilled, his plumage flashing amusement-lost superiority. "The Deathworld sent something." "A garbage scow," another replied. "How fitting." Laughter rippled through the gallery. Musical Drenith harmonics. Wet Thalosi croaking. The clicking of Kethvoran mandibles. The shuttle's ramp descended with a grinding shriek of metal. Jack Harlan walked out. The probes had shown humans as apex predators on a world that killed everything. They had imagined something massive, armored, visibly dangerous. He was smaller than they expected. The scans had noted dense musculature for his mass, reinforced bone structure, anomalous joint stress tolerance. The analysts had flagged it, then dismissed it as inefficient evolutionary overbuild. This creature was just over 2 meters. Bipedal. No claws, no fangs, no visible natural weapons. It wore a faded flight suit patched at the shoulders and knees, heavy boots. A belt of crude metal tools hung at its waist. "That's it?" The Drenith's voice carried across the bay. "That's the monster from the quarantine world?" Jack stopped at the bottom of the ramp. He looked up at the galleries. 300 alien faces looked back. He scratched the side of his jaw and started walking. No hesitation. No deference. No acknowledgement of the laughter or the stares. He moved like a man crossing a work site. Purpose without performance. The Kethvoran security detail intercepted him before he reached the bay doors. 4 of them. Insectoid bodies covered in chitinous armor. Compound eyes. Mandibles clicking a warning pattern. "Weapon scan," the lead enforcer buzzed. "Remain stationary." Jack stopped. He didn't raise his hands or spread his arms, just stood there while scanning beams washed over him. The scanner chimed. The Kethvoran reviewed the results. Metallic implements detected, belt-mounted. "Tools," Jack said. His voice was flat, unimpressed. "Pry bar, knife, multi-tool, nothing that runs on a battery." The Kethvoran conferred through pheromone bursts. The gallery watched. A Thalosi technician pulled up the scan results on a floating display, projecting them for the delegates to see. Primitive. The word rippled through the crowd. The human carried nothing but hand tools, no energy weapons, no shields, no technological augmentation of any kind. "Cleared," the lead enforcer finally clicked. "Proceed to the Grand Chamber. Do not deviate from the marked path." Jack walked past them without a word. The Grand Chamber was built to intimidate. Ceiling vaulted 300 meters overhead, carved from a single piece of crystallized atmosphere. Tiered seating rose on all sides, each level assigned by species rank in the concordance hierarchy. The Veyari occupied the highest tier, their serpentine bodies coiled on heated platforms. Below them, the Drenith preened on perches of woven light. The Thalosi clustered around environmental control stations, fingers dancing over haptic displays. Kethvoran enforcers lined the walls in rigid formation. And at the back, motionless as monuments, the Orruk watched. Silicon giants with bodies like weathered stone. They had not spoken in 600 years. But they watched. The center of the chamber was an open floor, the speaking ground, where delegates addressed the concordance. Jack walked into that space alone. 1,200 delegates looked down at him, every species that mattered in known space, every power that had shaped galactic civilization for 10,000 years. "The specimen arrives," a Drenith announcer called, his voice amplified through the chamber's acoustic architecture. "The single representative of Sol 3. Classification: Class-IX Deathworld. Quarantine status: permanent. Invitation status: observer only. No speaking rights. No voting rights. No formal recognition." The terms of the joke, laid out for everyone to hear. Jack stood in the center of the floor. He didn't look up at the tiers, didn't scan the room for exits or threats. He just stood there, weight even, hands loose at his sides. "Looks lost," someone murmured. "Looks primitive. Smells wrong," a Thalosi added. "The atmospheric sensors are registering unusual chemical output. Hydrocarbons, sodium chloride, some kind of biological waste product." "Sweat," another Thalosi said, checking the database. "The creature regulates temperature through fluid excretion. Barbaric." The commentary continued. Jack waited. Then the crowd shifted. A path opened through the lower tiers. The delegates pulled back, making room for a figure that descended toward the speaking floor with ancient grace. Sethalar Von, 3,000 years old, poison master of the Veyari Dominion. His scales were deep violet, fading to black at the edges, colors that marked centuries of biochemical mastery. His eyes were gold with vertical pupils. His movements were liquid, hypnotic, deliberate. He carried the chalice of welcome. The vessel was older than most civilizations in the room, crystal and bone, fused by methods long forgotten. It held a liquid that shifted colors, amber to green, to something that had no name in any language present. Every delegate knew what it contained. The first drink was tradition. Every new species to join the concordance received it. A poison, carefully measured, enough to cause pain, disorientation, temporary paralysis. A reminder that the concordance could destroy them at any moment. A lesson in hierarchy. The human would drink. The human would collapse. The delegates would laugh. And in 1,000 years, they would still tell the story of the day the Deathworld sent its champion, and the champion fell in seconds. Sethalar Von stopped 3 meters from Jack. He held the chalice forward with ceremonial precision. "Welcome, creature of Sol 3. His voice was silk over venom. "The concordance extends its hospitality. Drink and be received." Jack looked at the chalice, then at Sethalar Von. "What's in it?" The chamber stirred. The question was not part of the ritual. "The traditional mixture," Sethalar Von replied smoothly. "A blend of ceremonial compounds, symbolic of the concordance's embrace. Smells like poison." Silence. Sethalar Von's scales shifted to a color Jack couldn't read, but he could read the body language underneath, the slight tension, the readiness. "All new delegates drink from the chalice of welcome. It is tradition." Jack reached out and took the chalice. For a moment, he held it, looked at the liquid inside. The colors swirled, reacting to the heat of his hand. Then he drank. Not a sip. Not a cautious taste. He drained the entire chalice in 4 long swallows, throat working, and lowered the empty vessel. 1,200 delegates held their breath. They waited for the trembling, the collapse, the foam at the mouth, the desperate clawing at the throat as the Veyari toxins did what Veyari toxins always did. Jack wiped his mouth with the back of his hand. "Bit sour," he said. "Nothing happened." The human stood there, unchanged, unmoved, unaffected. The chalice hung loose in his grip. His eyes were steady. His breathing was even. Sethalar Vone's scales rippled through colors that had no name, but that every species in the room could read as wrong. The full measure, someone whispered. He drank the full measure. That dosage would kill a Drenith in seconds. It would stop a Kethvoran heart before it hit the floor. Jack handed the empty chalice back to Sethalar Vone. Thanks for the drink. The silence broke like glass. Every delegate spoke at once. Drenith shrieked. Thalosi croaked into their communication systems. Kethvoran enforcers clicked in confusion, pheromones spiking with alarm. The ordered hierarchy of the chamber fractured into chaos. Sethalar Vone stood frozen. His scales had gone pale, a color no living being had seen on a Veyari poison master. The color of failure, the color of impossibility. The compound, he hissed. The compound was pure, concentrated. There is no species resistant to— Reckon there is now, Jack said. The words were quiet, casual, but they carried. Sethalar. Vone's composure cracked. 3,000 years of ceremony. 3,000 years of watching lesser species writhe and beg. 3,000 years of absolute certainty in his art. Broken by a creature that should have been dead before it finished swallowing. This is impossible. His voice rose, lost its silk. You should be convulsing. Your nervous system should be. Should be a lot of things. Jack rolled his shoulders. Got a strong constitution. The delegates watched. The Drenith had stopped laughing. The Thalosi had stopped commenting. Even the Kethvoran had gone still. Their hive link flooded with conflicting signals. The Orruk watched, silent, ancient, their molten eyes fixed on the human with something that might have been interest. Sethalar Vone's hand moved to his belt, a hidden compartment, a secondary vial. The creature cheated, he announced, loud enough for the chamber to hear, some form of pre-treatment, a countermeasure. The ceremony must be conducted properly. He drew the vial. The liquid inside was black. No color shifts. No ceremonial beauty. This was not the first drink. This was execution. A second measure, Sethalar Vone declared, to ensure the validity of the welcome. No one stopped him. No one objected. The human was an observer. No rights, no protections. No formal recognition. It could die on the speaking floor, and the concordance would record it as a ceremonial irregularity. Sethalar Vone stepped forward, vial raised, his fangs extended, needle sharp, dripping with the same black compound. He would administer it directly, into the bloodstream. No chance of resistance. Jack watched him approach. The poison master struck. Fast, 3,000 years of practice, a motion refined across countless kills. The fangs drove toward Jack's throat with surgical precision. Jack's hand came up. Not fast, not dramatic, just there. His palm caught Sethalar Vone's face. Fingers wrapped around the back of the serpentine skull and stopped the strike dead. For a moment, they were frozen. Sethalar Vone's fangs centimeters from Jack's wrist. Jack's hand locked around the poison master's head. Then Jack twisted. The sound was short, wet, final. Sethalar Vone's body dropped. The vial shattered on the speaking floor, black liquid hissing where it touched the crystal. The poison master's head faced the wrong direction. His scales had gone gray. 3,000 years. Ended in less than a second. Jack looked down at the body, then up at the chamber. 1,200 delegates stared back, silent, frozen. He shouldn't have done that, Jack said. The Kethvoran enforcers activated, 20 of them breaking from the walls, chitin blades extending. The Thalosi techs screamed into their systems, triggering security protocols. The chamber's environmental systems hummed to life. The grand chamber of the galactic concordance became a kill box. And Jack Harlan stood at its center, rolling his shoulders, utterly unbothered. "Right then," he said. "Who's next?" The Cathvoran moved like a single organism. 20 enforcers flowed across the speaking floor in perfect synchronization. Chitin blades extended from forearm sheaths, curved, serrated, designed to pierce armor plating. Their compound eyes tracked Jack from multiple angles simultaneously. Pheromone bursts coordinated their attack vectors through the hive link. They had pacified rebellions, ended wars, brought entire species to submission through overwhelming coordinated force. Jack pulled the pry bar from his belt. The first enforcer reached him half a second ahead of the others. Standard hive tactic, a probe strike to test defenses before the swarm committed. The chitin blade swept toward Jack's throat in a precise arc, calculated to open arteries. Jack stepped inside the arc. The blade passed behind his head. The pry bar came up and punched through the enforcer's compound eye with a wet crunch. The hivelink screamed. 20. Cathvoran felt their squad brother die. Not heard about it. Felt it. The agony of chitin cracking. The terror of sudden blindness. The cold nothing that followed. The sensation rippled through their shared consciousness like fire through dry grass. 3 of them stumbled. Hesitation measured in fractions of a second. Jack was already moving. He ripped the pry bar free and swung low, taking the legs out from under the second enforcer. The creature's exoskeleton was designed to resist energy weapons and kinetic impacts. It was not designed for a steel bar driven into the joint where thorax met abdomen. The enforcer folded. Jack stamped down on its skull before it finished falling. Another death. Another surge of shared agony through the link. The remaining enforcers tried to adapt. They spread out, abandoning the tight swarm pattern. 4 of them circled left, 4 circled right. The others held position, waiting for an opening. Jack didn't give them time to find one. He charged the group on the left. Not tactical, not calculated. Just forward, fast, and violent. The Cathvoran weren't built for creatures that attacked into superior numbers. Their entire combat doctrine assumed the enemy would retreat, defend, or die. Jack did none of those things. The pry bar cracked chitin. The knife came out, 7 inches of ceramic steel composite, and found the soft tissue between armor plates. An enforcer slashed at Jack's ribs. The blade scored a line of red across his flight suit. He ignored it. Drove his elbow into the attacker's throat, felt cartilage give way. Blood, his and theirs, splattered across the crystal floor. The hive link was chaos now. Death after death fed back through the shared consciousness. Pain compounded. Terror multiplied. The coordination that made Cathvoran enforcers deadly dissolved into noise and confusion. An enforcer froze mid-strike, overwhelmed by the sensory overload from its dying squad brothers. Jack opened its throat with the knife. Another one tried to flee. Instinct overriding training. It made it 4 steps before Jack caught it from behind. The delegates in the upper tiers watched in silence. The clicking of mandibles had stopped. The Drenith had stopped preening. The Thalosi had stopped commenting on their displays. They watched the human tear through their enforcers like a natural disaster. A disaster that took 60 seconds. Maybe less. 14 Cathvoran bodies on the speaking floor. The remaining 6 had pulled back, clustering together. Chitin blades raised but no longer attacking. Their compound eyes were wide. Their pheromone glands pumped distress signals into the air. Jack stood in the center of the carnage. His flight suit was torn in 3 places. Blood ran down his left arm from a gash he hadn't bothered to acknowledge. The pry bar dripped. The knife dripped. He wasn't breathing hard. Environmental protocols. The voice came from the Thalosi tier, high-pitched, frantic. Activate environmental protocols now. The air changed. Jack felt it before the displays confirmed it. A thinning, a coldness. The chamber's atmospheric systems had been designed to maintain perfect comfort for the Concordance's member species. Now they did the opposite. Oxygen content dropped. The standard 21% that most species required plummeted toward 15, then 12, then 10. Temperature followed. The pleasant warmth vanished. Cold rolled through the chamber like a tide. Not the gradual chill of a cooling system, but a sudden, brutal drop designed to shock warm-blooded physiologies into shutdown. Pressure increased, subtle at first, then noticeable, then crushing. The air grew thick and heavy, pressing against eardrums and sinuses. In the upper tiers, delegates started to react. The Drenith fluffed their plumage against the cold, hollow bones, making them vulnerable to temperature shifts. The Veyari coiled tighter on their heated platforms, scales dimming as their metabolism slowed. Even the Kethvoran enforcers clicked in discomfort, their respiratory systems struggling with the oxygen reduction. On the speaking floor, Jack stopped moving. His breath plumed white in the freezing air. His skin had gone pale. The blood on his arm was cooling, thickening. He could feel the pressure in his skull, behind his eyes, in his chest. He forced his breathing under control, the same discipline used to hold breath underwater. Slower intake, slower release, less oxygen used, less heat lost with every exhale. His body cooled slower than it should have. The Thalosi technicians watched their displays with desperate hope. Core temperature dropping, one reported. Respiratory rate decreasing. But blood oxygen retention is still above expected thresholds, another added. Levels are not collapsing as predicted. Increase the pressure gradient. Push the oxygen below 8%. That will affect the delegates in the lower tiers. Do it. Jack's knee touched the crystal floor. One hand braced against the ground. The cold was deep now, seeping into muscle and bone. Each breath was work. The air felt like mud in his lungs. Around him, the last 6 Kethvoran enforcers collapsed. Their respiratory systems couldn't function below 12% oxygen. They twitched, mandibles clicking weakly, and went still. In the lower tiers, delegates began to choke. A Drenith fell from its perch, wings too cold to catch air. It hit the floor with a sound like breaking glass. 2 Veyari slumped on their platform, scales gone gray. A Thalosi technician in the control station stumbled, gasping, before his colleague caught him. "The human," someone croaked. "Focus on the human." Jack's other knee touched the floor, both hands flat on the crystal, head down, breath coming in short, visible bursts. The Thalosi watched. The chamber watched. Then Jack raised his head. His eyes were bloodshot. Frost clung to his eyebrows. Every breath was a fight. But his eyes were clear, focused, fixed on the environmental control station 3 tiers up. He put one foot under him. "That's impossible," a Thalosi whispered. "The oxygen level is at 7%. No carbon-based life form can maintain consciousness at..." Jack stood up. It wasn't fast. It wasn't dramatic. It was slow and grinding and brutal. Every muscle fighting the cold and the pressure and the suffocating air. His joints creaked. His vision narrowed. His heart pounded against a chest that felt wrapped in iron. But he stood, and he started walking. The gravity hit him after 3 steps. Localized manipulation. Concordance technology at its finest. The floor beneath Jack's feet suddenly pulled at him with 3 times standard gravity. His weight tripled in an instant. He went down hard, knees cracking against crystal, palms slapping flat. The pry bar clattered away, suddenly too heavy to hold. In the control station, the Thalosi technicians piled on the pressure. 3.5, 4, 4.5. Jack's spine curved. His arms trembled. The weight was enormous, not just on his body, but in his body. His bones held. They flexed under the load, but didn't break. Inefficient overbuild, the scans had said. Under 5 times gravity, it was exactly what kept him from snapping. "Increase it," the lead technician ordered. "Maximum output. That will rupture the gravity field. The effect will spread. The creature is still moving." It was true. On the speaking floor, flattened by 5 times standard gravity, Jack Harlan was moving, fingers digging into the crystal, arms dragging his body forward, inch by inch, centimeter by centimeter. His face was pressed against the floor. Blood vessels had burst in his eyes, painting the whites red. Every breath was a war against the weight crushing his lungs. But he moved. That's not possible. The Thulosite technician's voice had lost all scientific detachment. The human skeleton should be pulverized. The cardiovascular system should have failed. This is not... The gravity generator screamed. The sound cut through the chamber, a mechanical shriek of systems pushed beyond their limits. The localized field that had been focused on Jack flickered, destabilized, spread. Gravity fluctuations rippled across the grand chamber. In the Drenith tier, the effect hit like a hammer. Hollow bones that had evolved for flight shattered under sudden pressure increases. Bodies tumbled from perches, too damaged to catch themselves. The aristocrats who had laughed at Jack's arrival died screaming, their musical voices twisted into sounds no Drenith had ever made. The Vayari platforms lurched. Serpentine bodies rolled, unable to grip heated metal suddenly pulling at them with inconsistent force. Some tumbled into the lower tiers, others slammed into walls. The Kethvoran along the walls went down in waves. Their hivelink carried the confusion and terror of hundreds of enforcers simultaneously experiencing gravitational chaos. Some were crushed, others were thrown. All of them stopped functioning as a coordinated force. Even the Orruk shifted. Silicon giants who had stood motionless for centuries, adjusting their stance as gravity pulled at them from multiple directions. Their molten eyes tracked the chaos with something that might have been surprise. And on the speaking floor, the weight on Jack lifted. He pushed himself up, slowly, painfully, every joint screaming, every muscle torn and bruised. Blood ran from his nose, his ears, the corners of his eyes. But he was standing, and the chamber was falling apart around him. "Restore order." The voice came from somewhere in the upper tiers. Drenith, terrified. Someone restore order. No one could. The hierarchy that had governed the Concordance for 10 millennia fractured in real time. Species turned on species. The Vayari delegation screamed at the Thalosi for the environmental failures. The Thalosi screamed back that the Vayari had started this with their poison ritual. Kethvoran enforcers received contradictory orders from a dozen different authorities and froze, their hivelink paralyzed by conflicting commands. A second wave of enforcers had been deployed from the chamber's security alcoves, 40 of them, fresh, unconnected to the hivelink that had carried the trauma of the first wave's deaths. They advanced on Jack in standard formation, chitin blades ready, compound eyes clear. Jack picked up his knife. The first enforcer died before it understood what was happening. Jack moved through them without pattern or predictability. Not military precision, something older, rougher, the kind of violence that didn't come from training, but from surviving things that wanted to kill you every day of your life. He broke formation, used bodies as shields, turned their coordination against them. When 2 enforcers struck simultaneously, he put a third between them and let their blades find the wrong target. The Thalosi tried to help. Gravity fluctuations targeted Jack's position. But the system was damaged now, unreliable. Half the attempts missed. Others caught enforcers instead, crushing them flat or hurling them into walls. Atmosphere continued to cycle erratically. Zones of freezing cold alternated with pockets of unbreathable heat. Oxygen levels spiked and dropped without pattern. Delegates in the lower tiers died from the environmental chaos that had been meant to kill one human. Jack kept moving. Enforcer after enforcer fell. His flight suit was ribbons now. Cuts covered his arms and chest. One eye had swollen half shut from an impact he didn't remember taking. He was limping. Something wrong with his left knee. None of it slowed him down. The 40 became 30, 20, 10. The last 5 tried to run. Jack let them go. He had a different target now. The environmental control station sat 3 tiers up from the speaking floor, a platform of crystalline displays and haptic interfaces. 6 Thalosi technicians crewed it. They had watched the entire massacre from what they thought was safety. Jack climbed. The tiered seating hadn't been designed for someone to ascend by force. Delegates scrambled out of his way. Those who could still move. Some tried to stop him. A Vayari struck at him with ceremonial blades. Jack caught the arm and broke it. A Drenith dove at his eyes with talons extended. Jack swatted it from the air and kept climbing. The Thalosi watched him come. Their large eyes were wide. Their mucus-covered skin had gone pale. They had no weapons. They had never needed weapons. Technology protected them. Systems protected them. The ordered structure of the Concordance protected them. Jack reached the platform. "Please," the lead technician croaked. "We were following protocol. The systems are designed to—" Jack grabbed him by the throat and shoved him into the primary console. Displays cracked. Haptic interfaces shattered. The technician's body went through the crystal panel and into the machinery beneath. Sparks flew. Systems screamed. The other technicians tried to run. Jack caught them one by one. He didn't kill them all. Some he simply broke. Arms, legs, spines. Enough that they couldn't operate the systems. Enough that they would remember. The last one he held over the console that controlled the chamber's atmospheric systems. "Turn it off," Jack said. "I can't. The systems are damaged. I don't—" Jack pressed the technician's face closer to the sparking, ruined machinery. "Turn it off." Trembling amphibian fingers found controls that still worked. Emergency shutdown sequences activated. The atmospheric cycling began to stabilize. Gravity fluctuations dampened. Jack released the technician. The Thalosi collapsed, weeping, leaking fluids from orifices Jack didn't want to think about. He looked out over the grand chamber. It was a ruin. Bodies everywhere. Kethvorin, Drenith, Vayari, Thalosi. Some dead, some dying, some simply broken. The pristine crystal floor was covered in blood and worse. The ordered tiers had become chaos. Delegates huddled in clusters, too terrified to move. The main lighting systems had failed. Emergency illumination bathed everything in red. Jack found the master power junction for the station. He didn't shut it down. He destabilized it. The lights flickered, died. Red emergency lighting pulsed once, twice, then went dark. The grand chamber of the galactic concordance, the seat of power for 10,000 years, went black. In the darkness, something worse than silence filled the void. The sounds of the wounded, the clicking of Kethvorin distress signals, the wet sobbing of Thalosi, the broken musical wails of dying Drenith, and somewhere in that darkness, moving without sound, was the human. "What have we done?" someone whispered. No one answered, because no one knew. The darkness had a sound, not silence. Silence would have been mercy. The grand chamber was filled with noise, the wet rasping of damaged lungs, the clicking of Kethvorin distress signals growing weaker, the soft keening of Drenith, who had watched their flock mates shatter on the crystal floor. And underneath it all, movement. Delegates who had spent millennia in climate-controlled comfort now huddled together like prey animals. Species that had never shared space without strict hierarchical protocols, pressed against each other in clusters. A Thalosci crouched beside a Veari. A Drenith sheltered beneath the bulk of a dying Kethvoran enforcer. Hierarchy meant nothing in the dark. Survival meant everything. "Where is it?" someone whispered. The translator systems had failed with the power grid, but terror needed no translation. "Where is the human?" No one answered. No one knew. The chamber was vast. 300 meters of vaulted ceiling, tiered seating rising on all sides, 1,000 places to hide, 1,000 paths through the wreckage, and somewhere in that wreckage, Jack Harlan moved. They couldn't see him. The emergency lighting had died with everything else. The only illumination came from sparking consoles and the bioluminescent patches on certain species' skin, faint glows that painted targets on the creatures who bore them. But they could hear him. A scream cut through the darkness, short, gurgling, then nothing. The sound came from the western tier, 30 meters away, maybe 40. "He's there," a Veari hissed. "He's in the western," another scream. "Eastern tier this time, closer." "That's impossible. He can't move that fast in the dark. He can't." A body fell from somewhere above. It hit the speaking floor with a sound like wet cloth dropped on stone. The bioluminescent patches on its skin flickered once and went dark. The delegates went silent. Even the wounded tried to muffle their pain. Sound meant location. Location meant death. Minutes passed. Hours. Time lost meaning in the lightless chamber. The only measure was the screams, each one marking another death, each one coming from a different direction. A Kethvoran enforcer, still functional, tried to organize a defense. It gathered 6 of its wounded squad brothers. They formed a perimeter, chitin blades extended, compound eyes straining against the absolute black. The human hit them from below. He had been under the tiered seating, crawling through the structural supports. He came up through a gap in the crystal floor and took 2 of them before they understood what was happening. The others turned, slashing at darkness. One of them hit another enforcer. Another struck only air. Jack killed them in 11 seconds. The Hivelink carried their deaths to every surviving Kethvoran in the chamber. The last enforcers stopped moving, stopped fighting. They curled into defensive positions and waited to die, their coordination network so flooded with trauma that autonomous action became impossible. In a cluster near the central platform, a Drenith aristocrat began to laugh, high and broken and musical. The sound echoed through the darkness until another Drenith silenced him with a blow to the skull. No one commented. No one objected. They just waited. The Orruk had not moved in 600 years. They stood at the highest tier of the Grand Chamber. Silicon giants. Bodies like weathered mountains. Eyes like cooling magma. They had observed the Concordance's deliberations for longer than most species had possessed written language. They had watched empires rise and fall. They had seen the classification of 10,000 worlds. They had never intervened. When the first Orruk shifted its weight, the sound echoed through the chamber like distant thunder. Delegates who had forgotten the giants were there turned toward the sound with desperate hope. The Orruk were ancient, powerful. They could stop this. They could save what remained. The giants descended from their tier. Slow, deliberate. Each step shook the damaged floor. Their molten eyes swept across the carnage without expression. Bodies. Blood. The broken remnants of species who had thought themselves masters of the galaxy. They reached the sealed main entrance of the chamber. The doors had locked when the security protocols activated. 30 centimeters of reinforced alloy, designed to contain any threat until the situation could be controlled. The lead Orruk placed one massive hand against the door. Pushed. Metal screamed. Alloy buckled. The door bent outward, then tore free of its housing entirely. Emergency lighting from the corridor beyond spilled into the chamber. a thin line of illumination that seemed blinding after the absolute darkness. The delegates stared. The Orruk weren't opening the door to stop the human. They were leaving. "Wait!" A Thalosi scrambled toward them, mucus-slick skin reflecting the corridor light. "You must help us. The creature is killing everyone. Your strength could—" The lead Orruk paused. It turned its massive head toward the Thalosi, toward the survivors huddled in the ruins of their diplomatic hall. When it spoke, the voice was like continents grinding together, a sound that vibrated in bone and stone and the deepest structures of the chamber. You invited the consequence. You mocked it when it arrived. You attacked it when it did not die. The Thalosi trembled. Others drew closer, desperate for any words that might offer hope. Now you learn what the quarantine was protecting. The Orruk turned back to the corridor, not the galaxy, from the Deathworld. It stepped through the ruined doorway. The Deathworld from the galaxy's arrogance. The other Orruk followed, one by one, silent again. They did not look back. The survivors watched them go. The thin light from the corridor cut across the chamber, illuminating patches of floor. Bodies, debris, the scope of the destruction visible in fragments. No one followed the Orruk out. The human was still in here, in the dark, waiting. And no one wanted to be caught moving when the lights returned. The Veyari had come to the summit armed, as tradition demanded. Their delegation carried a curated arsenal, compounds measured for ceremony, deterrence, and controlled lethality. Poisons that could kill in seconds, in hours, in years. Contact agents, airborne toxins. 3,000 years of biochemical mastery, contained in crystalline vials. Now they broke that restraint. The 17 surviving members of the Veyari delegation seized a section of the eastern tier and went to work, coating every surface within reach. The systems couldn't keep up. Containment fields flickered. Circulation failed to stabilize. The toxins didn't spread cleanly, they fractured. Dense pockets of lethal concentration formed and collapsed, drifting through thinner gaps that shifted without pattern. What should have been a sealed kill zone became something worse, unpredictable, uncontrolled. The floor slicked with contact poisons that would stop a heart in 3 beats. The air thickened with compounds meant to shut down respiration. "This will work," the delegation's second eldest hissed. His scales had gone pale gray, fear colors that no Veyari would normally display in public. "No creature can survive this concentration, not even the Deathworlder." "Sethalar Vone said the same thing," another replied. "Sethalar Vone used a single dose. We are using everything we brought. When the creature comes, it will die before it reaches us." "The environmental systems are still unstable," one of them warned. "Containment fields are degraded. Dispersion will be uneven." "The area is saturated," the second eldest snapped. "Even uneven concentration will be lethal." They waited, coiled together at the center of their chemical perimeter. 17 serpentine bodies pressed close, seeking stability they would never admit needing. The darkness beyond was absolute. Then footsteps. Slow, steady, approaching from the north. The Veyari tensed, injecting themselves with antidotes calibrated for controlled exposure. The footsteps reached the edge of the poisoned field. "Stopped." "He knows," one of the younger Veyari whispered. "He can smell it. He won't come through." The footsteps resumed. Jack walked into it. The smell hit him first. Bitter, chemical, thick enough to taste. Saturation. Not uniform, but heavy. Dangerous. His eyes tracked the floor as he moved. Vials, shattered, empty, scattered in the rush. Poison. Not all of them. The Veyari wouldn't stand inside this without protection. Antidotes. He stepped forward anyway, killing as he moved, forcing a path through the chaos. and watching the ground at the same time. Another vial, intact, different casing. He grabbed it, drove it into his thigh, and kept moving. No idea what it would counter. Just enough to buy time. The contact toxins took hold. His boots crossed surfaces that should have killed on contact. Chemicals soaked through torn fabric and into open wounds. Skin blistered, split, bled. He didn't stop. The air hit next. Neurotoxins flooded his lungs. Paralytics attacked his nervous system. Cellular agents began breaking him down from within. His eyes reddened. Blood ran from his nose, his ears, his mouth. His breath turned wet, unstable. His hands trembled. He kept moving. The Vayari watched in silence. This wasn't resistance. The toxins were working. His body was failing, but it wasn't enough. He was still coming. "More!" the second eldest screamed. "Inject the reserves directly, all of it, now!" Vayari scrambled for the remaining vials. They hurled them at the approaching figure, shattering crystal containers against his chest, his face, his hands. Concentrated poison splashed across his wounds, enough to kill anything that needed to breathe. Jack didn't slow. His hand snapped out, catching one of the vials before it shattered. Another he tore from a Vayari's grip as it tried to inject itself. He bit one open, swallowed what he could, crushed the second, and drove it into his thigh. No idea what any of it did. No time to care. Jack reached them. The second eldest struck with ceremonial fangs, driving them deep into Jack's shoulder, injecting the most lethal compound in Vayari biochemistry directly into the bloodstream. Jack grabbed the Vayari's head with both hands. The sound was familiar now. Short, wet, final. The others tried to flee. They slithered over each other, desperate to escape the killing ground they had created. But the toxins they had spread worked against them. Their antidotes protected against their own compounds, but not against the thrashing bodies of their dying kin. Not against the chaos of 17 panicking serpents in an enclosed space. Jack moved through them like a harvester through grain. When it was done, he stood in the center of the chemical fortress, surrounded by 17 bodies, covered in blood and poison and fluids he couldn't name. His body was a ruin, toxins eating him from the inside, wounds refusing to close, organs struggling to function. Behind him, the Vayari delegation lay still. The species that had sent the joke invitation, the species whose poison master had offered the chalice of welcome. Their greatest weapons surrounded them like a funeral shroud. None of it had been enough. He coughed. Blood sprayed across the nearest corpse. Then he turned and walked back out of the kill zone, toward the speaking floor, toward the center of the chamber where this had all begun. The lights came back in stages. First a flicker, then a pulse, then a gradual brightening as the emergency systems finally completed their reboot cycle. Dim illumination spread across the grand chamber, revealing what the darkness had hidden. The survivors saw everything. Bodies covered the tiered seating. Kethvoran enforcers scattered like broken toys. Dreneth aristocrats crumpled beneath their shattered perches. Thalosi technicians slumped over ruined consoles. Vayari coiled in death positions across every level. The crystal floor of the speaking ground was no longer crystal. It was a mosaic of blood and ichor and biological fluids from a dozen different species. Cracks ran through the ancient material where gravity fluctuations had stressed it beyond tolerance. Scorch marks surrounded the ruined environmental control stations. And in the center of it all, Jack Harlan stood. He looked like death walking. His flight suit had been reduced to rags. Wounds covered every visible inch of skin. Cuts, burns, chemical blisters, puncture marks from Vayari fangs. Blood seeped from his eyes, his nose, his ears. His left arm hung at an angle that suggested the shoulder was dislocated. His breathing was wet and wrong. But he stood. The survivors stared at him. 43 delegates remained from the original 1,200. They were scattered across the tiers, pressed against walls, huddled behind debris. None of them moved. Jack looked back at them. For a long moment, nothing happened. The chamber held its breath. Then Jack bent down and picked up his pry bar. He wiped the blood off on what remained of his flight suit, slid it back into his belt, found his knife a few meters away and did the same. The survivors watched every movement, waiting for him to come for them, waiting for the killing to resume. Jack turned toward the exit the Auric had forced open. The thin light from the corridor beyond seemed impossibly bright after everything that had happened in the dark. He started walking. Delegates pressed themselves back as he passed. A Thalosi flinched so hard it fell off its perch. A Drenith covered its eyes with its wings, as if not seeing the human would make it invisible. Jack didn't look at them. His focus was on the door, on the corridor beyond, on whatever came next. He passed the body of Sethalar Vone. The Poison Master lay where he had fallen, neck twisted at that impossible angle. His scales had gone black in death, the final color shift. The empty chalice of welcome lay nearby, still smelling faintly of the toxin that should have been a humiliation, and instead became a declaration of war. Jack didn't look down. He reached the threshold of the ruined door. Stopped. For a moment, he stood there, silhouetted against the corridor light, one hand resting on the bent metal of the doorframe. The survivors held their breath, wondering if he would speak, if he would demand something, if this nightmare had terms. Jack looked back over his shoulder. His red-stained eyes swept across the ruins of the Grand Chamber. The bodies, the survivors, the shattered remnants of 10,000 years of careful diplomatic hierarchy. "Next time," he said, "send a better invitation." Then he walked out. The survivors didn't move for a long time. They stayed frozen in their positions, pressed against walls and crouched behind debris, waiting for the human to return, waiting for the next escalation. Nothing came. Eventually, a Thalosi technician found a working console. Communications were down. The planetary defense grid was offline. Someone had triggered a lockdown from inside the chamber before the power failed. Rescue teams were trying to breach the facility, but the Auric had damaged more than just the main door on their way out. It would be hours before help arrived. A young Drenith, barely past fledgling age, crept toward the speaking floor. It looked at the blood staining the crystal, at the bodies scattered across the ancient ground, at the place where the human had stood, unbroken, while everything the concordance threw at him failed. "What do we do now?" it asked. No one answered. But they were all thinking the same thing. The galactic concordance had ruled for 10,000 years. They had classified every world, categorized every species, controlled every threat through protocol and technology and the absolute certainty of their superiority. And now they sat in the blood-soaked ruins of their own arrogance, surrounded by their dead, watching the corridor where the Deathworlder had disappeared. They had looked at a Class-IX Deathworld and seen a joke. They had sent an invitation as an insult. They had offered poison as a welcome. Now they understood the cost of that mistake. The galaxy had just changed, and they were the ones who would have to explain how.
Hey there, space human. I'm really curious about your thoughts on this video. Drop a quick comment and let me know what's on your mind. Or just say hi if you prefer. Either way, I'd love to hear from you. Also, remember to check the pinned comment. Trust me, it's worth a look. Oh, and one last thing. I've chosen another video for you to watch. Just click the card here, or here if you want the whole playlist. See you there.